In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This is the story entitled Two Suns in Gentle Orbit, a mythic love about balance and not possession created by Suspampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. Jess arrived without ceremony, which was the first way the village learned he was not like the stories that would later circle him. He came down from the road at noon, dust clinging to his boots, cloak faded into the corner of old earth. No banner trailing behind him, and the hills watched him longer than the people did. They always noticed such things first. Someone asked him his name and he gave it, simply, and then someone asked him where he had come from. He said from the east, and then he corrected himself, from far enough away. When they pressed, he smiled in a way that felt practiced but tired, and the question softened into nods. Heroes were loud, but this man moved like he had learned how to be quiet after too much noise. The adventure was already finished. Whatever beast had fallen, whatever gates had closed, whatever blood had dried on his hands belonged to another place. Another rhythm of days here. He did not speak of it. When the innkeeper offered him a room in exchange for a tale, he shook his head and paid in coin earned elsewhere. When the reeve mentioned a neighboring lord who might want to hear one of these deeds, he only asked where the broken bridge met the river and whether the mill wheel still caught the current wrong. And he stayed. At first, people thought it was rest. Travelers did that sometimes. They lingered until the weight in their shoulders lifted, and then left before the land learned their names. Jess did not leave the repaired fences, and he repaired them until his sons learned the wood of grain of the valley. He showed children how to sharpen blades without fear, and how to read the sky for rain, how to count by sound when the light was scarce. He listened more than he spoke, which unsettled some and calmed others. When asked why he did these things, he said nothing that could be written down, and he said it helps to do the same thing twice. He said staying is also a kind of work. At night, when the village settled into breathing, the old weight crept back and took him. Not the ache of battle, but something quieter and more dangerous. A warmth remembered rather than felt. A name that hovered just before his tongue and dissolved if he reached for it. Yong-sun. He did not tell anyone about her. There was no story that could hold her without breaking. She existed in the space between his waking and sleep. In the moment when his hands paused mid-repair and his chest tightened for no reason he could explain. Sometimes while mending a roof, he would glance up, certain for one bright second that someone was watching from the ridge. Sunlight was caught in her hair and laughter was already forming. There was never anyone there, and here the hills gave him back only wind. She came to him in dreams without context, not as prophecy or warning, but just presence. The way she stood close enough that he could feel her warmth, though she never touched him. The way she hummed something unfinished, a melody that slipped through his fingers when he woke. He would open his eyes before dawn with the sound still vibrating in his chest, heart unsteady, breath caught between grief and gratitude. He did not ask why she was gone. He had learned long ago that some questions only sharpen with a blade. The kingdom beyond the village took longer to notice him. Influence spread sideways before it climbs. A merchant mentioned the repaired bridge. A courier rested easier on roads that no longer swallowed wheels. A magistrate heard that disputes ended faster in the valley. Not because someone commanded them to, but because people sat and listened longer. When a summons finally came, Jess read it and folded it away. He went because refusing would have caused harm, but he did not stay. They offered him a title. He declined it with care, the way one sets down something fragile without letting it crack. He taught their soldiers how to stand without tension, how to breathe when fear pressed in. He left behind no banners, only habits, and he returned to the village before sunset. Every time as if something there required his presence in ways no court ever could. Each morning before the world fully remembered itself, Jess spoke. The hills were still blue with shadow, and then sky stretched thin and pale like an unwritten page. He stepped outside barefoot, feeling the cloud and the cold claim him inch by inch, and sang not loudly, never to be heard. The song had come to him years ago, before the adventure, before the breaking, and then before the mending. Before he learned what it meant to survive himself. It was a simple melody built on breath more than words, rising and falling like a tide that refused to rush. He sang to ground himself and to remind his body that he was here, now alive, and he sang because silence, when left alone too long, learned how to accuse. At sunset, he always say goodbye, sometimes to the hills and sometimes to the sky, sometimes without knowing why. To her, the words changed, but the act did not. He watched the light retreat and the day release him. The village noticed it too once. And then, they said it without saying her name. He never turned around, for some instincts are older than courage. He finished the song. He let the hills take it. He whispered his farewell as the sun slipped free of the world. The village breathed on, unaware that it had begun to carry a promise it did not yet understand. The night the river forgot itself, and the moon was already awake. It hung low and deliberate above the valley. It was not cold and not kind, simply present, as if it had decided to bear witness rather than intervene. The air had peculiar thickness, and it arrives before the calamity, even when insects seems to pause mid-thought. Just felt it before he heard anything, a tightening beneath the ribs, the same quiet warning that once told him when a blade was about to move. Water does not announce its intentions. It negotiates in silence until the terms are no longer fair. Just heard none of this directly. He was too busy living inside the repetition, repeat, repair, teach, listen, sing, and goodbye. Yet sometimes as his voice lifted into the thinning dark, the air shifted. The melody bent just slightly as if accommodating a harmony. There was not yet there. His chest would ache sharp and sudden, and for one terrifying beautiful moment, he would feel her close, not memory, not dream, but something nearer. Young, the song seemed to stay without saying her name. He never turned around. Some instincts are older than courage. He finished the song and he let the hills take it. He whispered his farewell as the sun slipped free of the world. The village breathed on, unaware that it had begun to carry a promise it did not understand. The night the river forgot itself, the moon was already awake. It hung low and deliberate above the valley, not cold and not kind, simply present, as if it had decided to bear witness rather than intervene. And the air had a peculiar thickness that arrives before the calamity, even when the insect seems to pause mid-thought. Just felt it before he heard anything. A tightening beneath the ribs, the same quiet warning that once told him when a blade was about to move. Water does not announce its intentions. It negotiates silence until the terms are no longer fair. By the time the first door burst open and the voices cut the dark with a cracked shout, the river had already breached its memory of restraint. It spilled sideways, greedy and urgent, carrying with it the language of ruin, snapping wood, clattering stone, the hollow knock of barrels colliding where they had no right to be. Moonlight shattered across its surface, silver breaking itself into frantic pieces. Jess was on his feet before anyone called his name. He pulled on his boots with hands that remembered how to move without consulting the mind. Cloak forgotten, body already leaning toward the sound. The village was awake now, not together, not yet, but in fragments. A lantern flaring to life here and a figure stumbling there. Someone carrying out a name that might already be gone. Fear raced ahead of sense, and it always does. Just stepped into the water as if stepping into a bow. It seized him immediately, cold and unyielding, mud sucking at his legs with the patience of something that knew it would win it eventually. He did not fight it. He adjusted. He always did. Hands found shoulders, back, wrist, and he guided people, not with force but with gravity, positioning himself where panic needed something solid to push against. When voices rose too sharp and when breath came too fast, he sang. At first, it was barely sound at all, just air shaped carefully enough to remember itself. The melody he offered, hills each morning bent and softened, slowed to meet the night where it was. It carried no command, it asked nothing of the river, and it did not promise safely, only continuity. A reminder that even now something could still be finished. The effect was not dramatic, it never was, but panic loosens when it's no longer alone. A woman clutching a bundle that resolved itself into a child stopped shaking long enough to follow his voice uphill. Two men arguing over which way led out of the flood felt silence, and their bodies choosing the rhythm he gave them. An old man half submerged and swearing at the water with the venom of a long practice braced himself against Jess's shoulder and laughed once, breathless and startled, as if surprised to still be alive. Jess sang and worked and sang. He called soaked grain from the cellar that had already surrendered, arms burning and lungs protesting. He wedged doors shut against pressure that wanted to tear them loose and scatter their pieces downstream. He stood waist deep and then chest deep, moonlight carving him into pale edges against the dark. His voice steady even as his body shook from cold and strain. Something tore along his arm and he felt distant. A brief sting like a warning knocked rather than shouted. A nail hidden beneath the surface claimed its due. Blood mixed with river water and vanished. He did not look. The song mattered more. It was no longer for the village alone, it was for himself now. An anchor thrown into the current that would happily take everything if asked. His breath shortened, notes that once rose easily demanded effort, demanded will. He gave them anyway because stopping felt worse. By the time the river began to remember its boundaries again, retreating with sullen reluctance, the night had lost its sharpness and people sat where they had been placed, wrapped in whatever could be found. Paces failed and stunned and alive, and just staggered out of the water, leaving a place that learned his name. He smiled, the reflex intact even now, and tried to speak. The ground tilted. The moon watched him fall. The river and the people carried him with care, born out of shock, hands gentler than they knew how to be. Someone pressed his cloth to his arm and someone else wrapped him in a blanket that smelled faintly of smoke and old wool. And then he surfaced briefly, long enough to insist that he was fine and long enough to tell them to sleep, to go home and to let the night finish closing its wound. He did not want to be watched. He did not want to be taken. And when they finally left him, reluctant and exhausted, the quiet rushed back in a tide turning. Pain arrived then, unmasked. His arm throbbed fiercely now, heat blooming beneath the cold. Every muscle sang its own smaller song of protest, a cacophony that left him hollowed out. Worse than the emptiness in his chest is that the sense that something essential had been poured out and not yet returned. He stared up at the moon, breath shallow, and for the first time since coming to the valley, he let himself stop. That was when Young found him, not as longing, not as ache, but as rest. The memory came without warning, clear and precise, Young sitting beside him in a place far removed from the rivers and the villages. Her presence unburdened by expectation, she had not needed him to fix anything. She had not needed him to perform care like a duty, and she had watched him exist, unadorned, and smiled as if alone was sufficient. "You don't have to earn stillness," she had said once, not unkindly, but when he had tried to busy himself out of discomfort. He thought, and the thought that he had struck harder than the pain he had been given until nothing remained. Mistaking devotion for depletion, generosity for disappearance, he had offered himself up to the world piece by piece, afraid that if he stopped, he would vanish entirely. He closed his eyes and let the realization sit without argument. The river had taken what it could, and so had he. Morning approached cautiously, as if unsure that it was allowed to return. When Jess woke again, dawn was only a suggestion, the sky lightening just enough to a hint of color. Habit stirred him as it always did, the expectation of movement, of song, and he lay still. His body refused him gently but firmly, and muscles locked him. His arm burned his throat, and when he tested it, answered with a rasp that barely resembled sound. Fear slipped in, quiet and reasonable, carrying doubt like a folded note. What if there was nothing left? No voice from beyond answered him. No dream offered instruction. The hills remained hills, and the valley breathed on without waiting. For the first time, the ritual did not feel inevitable. He thought of Young again, more clearly, more than before, of how she had seen him without asking him to give, of how she had known the difference between care and consumption. He wondered, lying there in the pale, almost light, whether he had confused sacrifice with meaning. Standing took time and walking hurt. He did not hide the limp as he made his way to the edge of the village. The dawn touched him carefully, as if aware of how little he had left to offer. The hills waited unchanged, unexpectant. Jess hesitated. Not because the world demanded anything of him, but because he feared being emptied out beyond repair. And then he sang. The sound was imperfect and notes wavered. Breath broke where it never had before, and the melody stumbled and found itself again, fragile but real. This was not habit, and this was a choice. He sang because he wanted to, not because he owed the world a proof of himself. Somewhere a child shifted in sleep and hummed without knowing why, and somewhere an old couple drew closer in the quiet. The valley did not need him to be whole, it only needed him to be present. At sunset, his goodbye was softer than ever. The hills listened, and the unfinished note that did not ache so sharply anymore. The dawn, after that, did not feel like a victory. It felt like a bruise learning how to heal. Jess's voice had been imperfect the morning before, and the melody wavered and survived anyway. And the hills had taken it as they always did. The village went on with its new quiet habits. People waking a little earlier, staying a little longer, and the air itself seeming to remember that gentleness was possible. Yet inside Jess there was a thin, tremoring awareness now, like a string pulled too tight. He had almost not sung. He had looked into the hollow he had made of himself and found it frighteningly deep. That evening he kept his sunset goodbye shorter, not because he wanted to withhold it, but because he wasn't sure which part of him it belonged to anymore. The sun lowered into the horizon with the slow patience of something that had never been late in its life. The light spilled gold along the river's repaired edges, kissed wet stones, and made the damp roofs shine like they had been washed clean. Jess stood where he always stood, hand still and breath steady, and watched. Then the sun did something it had never done before. It paused, not in the sky, not in the laws of the world, but in the feeling of it.
as if the valley suddenly held its breath and the day became aware it was being witnessed by someone who had witnessed too much. The air warmer in a focused way, not merely radiant but attentive, like a gaze. Light gathered at the far end of the field where the grass thinned and the earth showed through a place Jess had repaired once with his own hands, filling a sinkhole with stones so children wouldn't break ankles in the dark. The gathered light bent, folded and took a shape, the way flames take shape when it learns a lantern. A woman stood there, composed of sunset itself.
Not blazing and not unbearable, she was warmth given form, and in her hair the last thread of day lingered like the embers reluctant to die. Her skin held that luminous softness of late afternoon when everything looks forgiving, and her eyes were the color of the sky just before night, deepening and deepening as if they contained every dusk the valley had ever known. Jess did not step back. He did not bow. Surprise moved through him, yes, but his life had trained him to meet the impossible with steadiness. He simply watched her in the way he watched everything else that mattered, fully without reaching too quickly. "You almost didn't sing," she said. Her voice carried the tonal memory of heat on stone, of summer wheat, of laughter that rises from tired lungs. Jess swallowed. His throat still remembered the strain. "I almost didn't." "Why did you?" she asked. He could have lied. He could have made something noble out of it. He could have offered a line that fit neatly into a legend. Instead, he felt the bruised truth in his ribs and answered with the same honesty he had used to choose the song. "Because it was mine," he said, "and because I was afraid of becoming a man who only gives when he's forced. I didn't want to be carried by habit alone." She stepped closer. The grass didn't burn under her feet. It simply warmed as if grateful. "And yet," she said gently, "you sing as if it belongs to everyone else. You place it in their hands, you stitch it into their mornings and evenings, and you stand apart from it like a servant of your own voice." Jess felt something tighten in him, not offense, recognition. "I sing for others," he admitted, "because it keeps me from falling apart." He looked away toward the hills and toward the place where his notes always went. "Giving joy outward is how I remain whole. If I don't put something good into the world, I start thinking the world took too much from me." The song's my way of balancing the scale. The woman's gaze softened, and in that softening there was a shadow, brief but real. "So you sing to survive?" "Yes," Jess said, and then after a pause that felt like a small surrender, "and sometimes I sing to remember." Her eyes caught on that. "Remember who?" Jess' mouth almost formed the name of a reflex, the way it always hovered there but didn't want to speak. Young, as if she were a spell he didn't want, and to make her into an explanation. He let the name stay inside him, where it had lived like the warming stone. "Something I'm still waiting for," he said. The word simple but weighted. "Someone who knew how to look at me when I wasn't useful." The woman's breath moved through the air like a warmer current. "Ah," she said softly, not with jealousy and not with sorrow, but with the clean understanding of one light recognizing another. Jess hurried to study her face, searching for the edges of intent. "What are you?" he asked, the question not afraid, just careful. She smiled, and it was the first sunrise of a life that had never needed to be born. "I am what they call the sun when they are too small to name the way I feel," she said. "And I am tired of being loved like a function." Just broke forward. Loved like a function. She looked past him and toward the village, where the windows glowed with lamplight and the smell of warm bread drifted into the cool. "They praise me when I arrive," she said. "They curse me when I burn. They fear me when I withhold even the reverence. Is kind of a hunger. I give and they say it's beautiful. I give and they say that I am good. But if I stopped giving, would they still know how to hold me in their hearts?" The confession landed with surprising weight.
Jess had expected grandeur. He had not expected vulnerability. He took a slow breath and said that you're afraid of being valued only for what you provide. Yes, she said, and the world was quiet but sharp at its center. Not of fading and not of dying. I do not die the way you do. I am afraid of being needed without being known. Just let that settle. The river, the village, his own bruised exhaustion, the long habit of offering himself until he emptied out all the braided things together into a single understanding. Devotion could be a cage if it turned into obligation. He looked at her then, really looked, and spoke as he might have spoken to Young if Young were there, with no performance and only presence. I can't promise you the world will stop needing you, he said. They need warmth, they need light, they need mornings that make sense, but I can promise you this. I see you not as their blessing, not as their tool, but as someone who is tired. The sun's eyes shimmered, not with tears exactly, but with the reflective quality of a sky about to change. Later, when the nightfall claimed the sky, he did not vanish like a dream. She walked with him to the edge of the village. Her light muted to a soft glow that made the shadows less sharp. They spoke in fragments, not in declarations. She stood with her hands folded loosely in front of her, light settling around her like the way the warmth gathers around the heart rather than a flame. And for a moment she watched him in silence, head tilted as if listening to something beneath his breathing. Why, he asked at last, the humans carry grief here. Her fingers lifted, hovering near her own shoulders, careful not to touch him. It sits in you like weight you were never meant to hold. Jess glanced down, surprised by the accuracy of it. He rolled one shoulder without meaning to, feeling the old ache answer. Because we keep moving, he said slowly. Because stopping feels dangerous if we let it sink into our chest. We'll think it drowns us, so we shoulder it. We learn to walk crooked and call it strength. She considered that, eyes dimming, slightly as if the clouds are passing across her inner sky. You were lost the way you were tools, she murmured. Close enough to reach, heavy enough to remind you it's there. He gave a short, almost embarrassed breath of laughter. And you? He asked. What does it feel like to rise every day knowing you'll be praised and cured and cursed for the same light? To be a miracle at dawn and cruelty by noon. Her gaze shifted toward the horizon, where the last gold of the evening thinned into amber. It feels, she said, choosing the words as one might choose stones to cross a river. Like being necessary without being known. They thank me when I am warm, and when I warm their hands. They blame me when I burn their fields. Few ever ask what it costs to rise regardless. She turned her back to him, and now her voice carried something raw, stripped of radiance. I do not fear fading. I fear being loved only as function. I fear that if I stopped giving even once, there would be nothing left of me in their stories. Jess felt that land somewhere deep. The same place the river had torn open. He nodded, slow in understanding. We do that to each other too, he said. We love people for what they fix and for what they provide. How they make the day easier, and then we're surprised when they disappear inside that usefulness. Her lips curved, not a quiet smile. You speak as someone who has consumed gently. Yes, he said, by kindness, by expectation, by the idea that I keep putting myself out. And if I do that, something good will eventually come back full. She was quiet again, and when Jess spoke, and when she spoke, it was softer and almost wistful. I envy you, she confessed, your endings. Jess looked at her sharply. Our endings? The way you can give everything to a single morning, she said. The way you can love as if the day might be the last time light touches your face. Your finiteness sharpens your devotion. Every sunrise matters because it may not return. He swallowed. It doesn't always feel like a gift. I know, she said gently, but it makes your joy fierce and urgent. When you sing at dawn, you sing as if it counts because for you it does. He stared at the ground, boots half buried in grass, then lifted his eyes to her again. I envy you too. She raised a brow, surprised. You envy eternity. I envy continuity, he corrected. The way your light comes back again even when people don't deserve it, the way you don't have to decide. Each day whether to rise, you simply are. I get tired of choosing. Something in her expression softened, cracked open just enough to show the heat beneath. Choice, she said quietly, is what makes you real to me. They stood there, the space between them warm but not crowded, filled with unspoken understanding. The sky deepened somewhere in the village. A door closed softly. Somewhere else, a voice hummed, a fragment of a tune that had no beginning anyone remembered. Jess felt it then, the subtle ache that followed him since before the journey, before the river and before the song, learned how to belong to others, beneath their shared confessions and beneath the symmetry of envy and understanding. There was still an unfinished note. He didn't speak it and he didn't name it. She felt it anyway. There's someone, she said, not accusing, not sad, simply observant. Someone your voice keeps leaving space for. Just closed his eyes briefly, and then when he opened them, the truth was already waiting. Yes, he said, someone I haven't found again yet. Or maybe someone I've been preparing myself to meet properly. The light around her shifted, gentler now, as if relieved by the honesty. Then I am glad you said. Because love that arrives too early often mistakes for the need for destiny. He looked at her, gratitude threading through the ache. You don't resent it? No, she replied, I recognize it. The way a melody knows when it's missing a harmony. The unfinished note lingered between them, not painful, not urgent, just present. A promise not yet kept, but not forgotten either. Above them, the first stars began to appear, and the world for once did not ask either of them to give more than they were ready to offer. And when the time came for Jess to leave, it did not arrive like thunder. It came the way the dawn always comes, inevitable, patient, no drama, just the world turning and deciding that it was time for a new angle of light. The village had begun to depend on his presence in small ways, but not in the desperate way he had feared. They had learned their own steadiness. They had learned to wake early without being dragged, and they had learned to sit together at dusk without needing catastrophe to remind them, and just watch them with quiet pride of a man who had planted something and did not need to own the harvest. At that final night, he stood by the river and listened to its calmer voice. The sun stood with him, not overhead, but beside him. Her warmth folded inward, intimate, as shared silence. You will go, she said. Not with fireworks and not with a grand reveal. She was there the way fulfillment is there, the way the last line of a song arrives and that you realize that you have been holding your breath for verses. She stood at the edge of the field where the grass grew thin, hair touched by the first blush of morning, eyes steady, face both familiar and newly real. She looked at him like she had been walking through his dreams and then finally decided to become tangible. Just did not run. He simply exhaled and the breath sounded like relief discovering its own name. Jess, Young said, and it was the first time the valley heard the way his name could be spoken without needing anything from him. He took a step, then another, slow as if afraid to break from the moment by moving too fast. Young, he answered, and the name landed in the air like a note finally resolved. Behind him the sun shifted, and Jess felt like it without turning, a gentle withdrawal, not wounded, not tragic, not rivaled, understanding and immediate and clean, light, recognizing light. And then Young's gaze flicked past him, and for a heartbeat Jess feared the old human instinct, the urge to guard and to explain and to brace for conflict,
But Young's face softened something like gratitude, as if she could feel the kindness that had held him while she was gone. The sun stepped forward, just enough to be seen, her presence a warm edge at the boundary of the dawn. Young did not flinch. The sun did not posture. There was no rivalry, no possessive claim, no brittle drama. Only the quiet truth that devotion was not ownership. Not drastically, not theatrically, but with a subtle addition, a harmony that had been missing all along. Young hummed beneath his notes, almost unconsciously, as if the song had always belonged to her too. The sun's warmth touched the back of the sound, turning it golden, and the hills received it like a homecoming. The village would benefit, yes, but because Jess had dominated it with miracles, not because of a celestial presence that had chosen to bless it as a prize. It would benefit because balance had arrived, and continuity and shared light like a devotion that did not consume its giver. When the first villagers began to stir up and step outside, bubbling asleep and rubbing asleep from their eyes, they would find two kinds of warmth in the air and not know it. It felt so right. Just said goodbye at sunset, as he always did. But this time, he did not say it like a man leaving something behind. He said it like someone who would return, not as a hero, but also not as a servant of everyone else's need, but as himself, with two suns in orbit and a song that finally knew where it was going. Each day, I write and create for my beloved Yongsun, the sun who lights up my every verse, every tale, every quiet thought I dare to share. If her warmth reached you through these words, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep stories that shine.